Good morning and welcome to the Commission's press room. It's our pleasure to have today with us Commissioner Vestager, who will make a statement on two stated cases. So without further ado, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Today I would like to inform you about EU state aid rules in the steel sector and two state aid decisions that the Commission has just taken. First, the Commission has adopted a final negative decision asking Belgium to recover 211 million euros of aid granted to companies within the Duferco Group. Second, the Commission opened a formal investigation into possible aid measures granted by Italy to Ilva. These measures amount to just about 2 billion of financial support in total. But before going into the details of the two decisions, it is important to recall the wider context and why there are state aid rules that are specific to the steel sector. The European steel industry is a key industry in Europe. It employs more than 360,000 people in more than 500 different production sites in 23 member states. I think it is, everyone knows that the steel industry has been facing difficulties with overcapacity, both within the European Union and worldwide, and that there is stiff competition from other parts of the world. Therefore, the European response to the challenges of the sector has to be twofold. We need to ensure fair competition globally, as well as protect the level playing field within the European Union. This must go together because one depends on the other. If there are international trade distortions and unfair trade, the European Union has trade defense instruments such as anti-dumping or anti-subsidy to protect the European single market. Currently, there are more than 30 definitive measures in place on inputs of steel products. In addition, there are new anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations ongoing for 6 other steel products. At the same time, it is one of our key objectives to enhance the industrial competitiveness. This, of course, includes the 315 billion investment plan for Europe and the Commission's single market strategy. We need to invest in new technologies. We need to invest in innovation. The Commission has set up a high-level group on energy-intensive industries. And my colleagues, Katainen and Bienkowska, they organized the work in order to move forward. The European steel industry needs to be competitive globally, and therefore we need to take steps to ensure that it is. It cannot rely on public funds to survive. And over the past years, European steel companies have taken very significant steps in order to be competitive, to use cutting-edge technology, to be very, very modern. It is in this context that EU state aid rules don't allow public support for rescue and restructuring of failing steelmakers, but they do enable European member states to boost the global competitiveness of steel companies. In particular, state aid rules allow to support steelmakers to make them more competitive in the long run, to make sure that we can support research, development, innovation. And furthermore, the Commission under state aid rules have approved a number of national measures in several EU countries to compensate energy-intensive businesses, including steel companies, for their high energy cost. The latest example of that is the decision taken in December regards the UK. However, in view of the seemingly ever chronicle overcapacity of the steel sector, the European member states and the Commission has since the 1990s agreed to prohibit rescue and restructuring aid to steelmakers in difficulty. As past experience now show, this type of aid distorts competition, and it risks to lead to a harmful subsidy race between member states. It also doesn't help in the long run, unfortunately. It keeps uncompetitive capacity on the market, and worst of all, it transfers problems to other member states within our union. And of course, obviously, it is unfair to those steel producers who, for their own means, have restructured and modernized their companies. The Commission has consistently applied the approach to state aid control in the steel sector. It had to take tough decisions to recover illegal aid given in a number of member states. That includes Belgium, Germany, Italy, Poland, just to mention some. And of course, and that is the very painful part of restructuring, there are severe social consequences because people are being laid off, as we also have seen in recent days in the UK. There are workers who lose their jobs, and that is why the European Union is working with member states to help minimize job losses caused by economic conditions in the market. One example of that is the setting up of the European Globalization Adjustment Fund, where funds are used to give people another chance for being re-educated, retrained, to find a job in another sector. This fund started its operation in 2007 and has paid out more than 550 million euros, and it has helped almost 130,000 workers. Just today, the Commission has proposed to provide Belgium with 1 million euros from the fund to help former glass workers to find new jobs and also include young unemployed people in the action plan. And this is against this background, I would like also to inform you more in detail about the two state aid decisions regarding Duferco in Belgium and Ilva in Italy. In the case of Duferco, the Commission investigation showed that the Belgian region of Wallonia repeatedly injected public money in the Duferco between 2006 and 2011. This artificially boosted the company's revenues and postponed a very difficult yet unavoidable capacity of adjustment of steel production in Wallonia. The decision concludes that these injections of public money are state aid, since no market-based investor would do the same as the public authorities in investing in these companies. When aid is illegal, it must be recovered. Let me add that the aid granted to the Duferco Group did not prevent the steel plant in Wallonia to pull out from production and dismiss all its workers in 2013. And also in the case of the Commission, in this case, the Commission is using funds from a European Globalization Adjustment Fund to support the Walloon region as effort to retrain, to give possibilities for re-education for the workers who have been laid off. The second decision concerns Ilva. Ilva is the third largest manufacturer in the EU. Its plant in Taranto, South Italy, is the biggest plant within the European Union. Ilva has a very long history of non-compliance with environmental standards. Already since 2013, the Commission has been urging Italy to ensure that the Taranto plant complies with EU legislation on industrial emissions. The Commission has also received a number of complaints from competitors alleging that Italy is providing restructuring aid that allows Ilva to modernize its plants with public money to reach full capacity. We need to look into these concerns very carefully, as they concern large-scale measures to a significant player and might bring a very serious distortion of competition in a very competitive sector. Therefore, the Commission has today decided to open a formal investigation. In this context, let me underline three things. First of all, opening of an investigation do not prejudge the outcome of proceedings. It gives interested parties a possibility to express their views as well. Second, the decision makes it absolutely clear that the Commission will not stand in the way of public subsidies to clean up the serious pollution problems of the Taranto site and surroundings. Of course, there is a condition to this, which is that eventually the bill is sent to the polluter. We have a very strong polluter pay principle in the European Union. On the other hand, public money can't just be given to bring up the plants to environmental standards that apply to all European producers. Third, the Commission is supporting commercially viable steel production in the Taranto site, which is the best way to maintain sustainable jobs in the region. To conclude, these two decisions are consistent with long-established policy and with the long-term interest of the European steel industry. The European Union, the member states, and the businesses each needs to make full use of their possibilities to ensure the industry's global competitiveness and fair competition, of course, both within the EU, but obviously also globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now we can open the floor for questions. And I think perhaps we'll start with our Italian colleagues here on the left, please.
Commissioner Lorenzo Consoli from Asca News, Italy. About Taranto, Ilva. I wanted to ask a few questions, if it's possible for you. I don't know at what level you can already give some information about the inquiry, which is just being opened formally today. But we know that in the recent decree, the government has indicated that they would give 800 million to Ilva for the decontamination. And they say very clearly that this money will be recovered once the trial, which is going on now, the criminal trial, will be over, and it will be clear who was responsible for the contamination. But then there are also 300 million that the government is planning to give directly to Ilva as a loan at market conditions, so with interest, market interest. And the government says that they will recover this loan once the plant will be bought by the new company that will buy the plant. Now, my question concerns these 300 million, because I understand that the 800 million are, for you, will be fine if they are clearly given for environmental measures, depolluting, etc. But for these 300 million, they are clearly given to the company in order to be easily sellable, because they want to continue the production, they want to give it a key in the hands, let's say, to the new company that will buy it. So my question is, do you think that these 300 million could amount to a state aid to functioning, first of all, because it looks like they are not destined to depolluting activities or anything like this? Secondly, what happens if nobody buys Ilva? Ilva has 3 billion debt. So what happens with this money? What would the Commission say about this? Sorry, I stop here.
Well, obviously, it is still very early day. And as I said, we will not prejudge the outcome. Now we open formal investigation. We ask questions. Third parties can comment as well. And as I said, among other things, we have very strong complainants in the case, and they will, of course, also comment. One of the things that we will discuss is, of course, on what terms loans are given. As I said, on the Belgian case, one of the reasons why we find that there is state aid involved is that it's not on market terms, that you cannot find a market investor to give the same kind of loans that the Duferco business were given by the Wallonian authorities. And that will be part of the discussion, but for obvious reasons, since we're just in the beginning, these cannot be concluded yet, but this will be part of the questions that we will be raising.
Further questions? Louis, does it relate to this still? Okay, go ahead.
Commissioner Lewis Crofts, MLEX. You talked about the two decisions today being consistent with long-established policy in this area. Do you not think it's time for a new policy in this area? You know, you talked about how the rules on state aid date back to the 1990s, at a time when I think China wasn't dumping cheap exports on the European market. And similarly, you talked about, you know, focusing the plants on new technologies and on quality produce, which Europe should do. It's exactly the Port Talbot plant in the UK, which has had a new furnace last year, which is seeing the job losses. So I just can't quite see whether that the long-established policy has worked. Do you not think it's time for a new policy?
Well, one of the things that is still working for European steel industry is that in a number of fields it is cutting edge, where you find European companies being global leaders, especially in high-end production, where you produce steel of very, very high quality at quite high prices. And there you find that the modernization of European steel industry has been a success. You also find that in some of the production you find the lowest carbon footprint of any steel production that you see in other places. And it is still so that Europe is a net exporter of steel. So on balance, obviously, we focus on the difficulties and the things that we have to address, but I think it's very important to have as part of the picture that European steel industry is a key industry, and it is in a number of areas very successful in how it has progressed. I think one of the things that are urgent is, of course, to use the tools as strongly as we can. Because this is not a exclusively European issue, it is as much a global issue. And if you see that the Chinese transition of their economy over the years to come, of course, the dialogue with China about how to manage overcapacity in steel production is a very urgent dialogue. The urgency is also illustrated by the fact that we try to speed up the procedures when it comes to using anti-dumping and anti-subsidy tools. We have, as I said, more than 30 anti-dumping measures in place. We have 6 investigations going on, and I think that is crucial, because then we can enhance fair competition also globally and not only within the European Union. And that, of course, I think has to go hand in hand, and that is, I think, a very modern approach also to this sector.
Thank you. Over to you, please.
Good morning, Commissioner. I'm going to take advantage of you are here to make a question on a different issue. I would like to know your opinion about the proposal made by the Danish government about refugees, taking into account that you are Danish. I want to know what's your personal opinion on that, and also if you think that the European Commission should do anything, should analyze this proposal.
We'll come back to your question in a second, because we still have questions, I think, on the ongoing. So still competition. Any further questions still on the state aid cases? So we'll start there, please.
Yes, Catherine Feore, EU reporter. The EU's been criticised for being quite slow in taking anti-dumping measures. Is there anything that can be done to speed up those processes? Thank you.
Yes, I think so. We hear the criticism as well. And obviously, since global competition is fast-moving, it is important to be able to use anti-dumping measures in a timely fashion. One of the things where we have a reservation is the fact that we would like to investigate first and then put measures in place. Because also anti-dumping measures should be fair and square. so that anti-dumping measures is not used for the wrong reasons to protect industry, but for the right reason to make sure that we have a level playing field and fair competition. But that being said, I know that colleagues are working, I guess, as we speak, as to how measures can be speeded up and how we can be much more efficient in using these measures, because they are obviously needed in order to make sure that we have a level playing field.